Resentment, jealousy, and guilt are often stirred up in people, partly because we are haunted by the specter of unfixability. If someone implies that he or she has anything approaching a disciplined spiritual life, some of us get a sinking feeling inside. We either compare ourselves unfavorably with the other person, or we look for the flaws that must be hiding under the veneer of piety. What kind of person, therefore, should be writing about the spiritual life today? She would need to be very grounded in ordinary, everyday experience. She would need to be earthy and have the ability to see the funny side of the spiritual enterprise, even in the midst of great suffering. She would need to be crafty, wily enough to spot the Byzantine ploys of the ego to make itself the center of everything, even of its own suffering and struggle. She would need to be able to make judgments without being judgmental, to smell a rat without allowing her ability to discern deception sour her vision of the glory and joy that is everyone's birthright in God. Margaret Guenther is such a writer. She is also a feminist. That is, she writes from the perspective of a woman who has known what it is to be made invisible and to be set aside, ignored, and unheard. There's a lot of daft talk about the need for a woman's perspective. One writer recently told of the way in which she was always called upon for the woman's point of view in graduate school. It became an in-joke with her friends. Speaking as a woman, I think I'll have meatloaf for dinner. Yet there is a much-neglected feminine perspective that is at last being heard. Margaret writes a great deal about listening, waiting, and presence, all attributes that are associated with the feminine. She is unafraid of using images traditionally associated almost exclusively with women, metaphors of housekeeping and house cleaning. But she pulls no punches when she takes on patriarchal attitudes and posturing. When it comes to matters of simple injustice and plain ecclesiastical nonsense, she is both critical and inclusive. Spiritual direction is very susceptible to the female imagery of pregnancy and birth-giving. God is the great birth helper. It is no wonder that midwifery is the overriding metaphor of spiritual direction, and Margaret Guenther insists that men are as capable of it as women. We assist at the birth of each other in an environment of gracious hospitality. We also, from time to time, act as parents to each other. When a formerly autistic child was asked what parents were for, she replied, "They hope for you." That is what we can do for each other. But there is more to be learned than the recovery of the feminine in the use of metaphors from midwifery. There is also the recovery of the role of older people, the elders, in bringing souls to term. Grandmothers and grandfathers can play an important part in soul-making. Margaret conjures up the image of the Appalachian granny woman, wise, resourceful, and experienced, assisting at the birth of babies in cottages and shacks, remote and hard to reach. We need spiritual grannies and grandpas who have the time and the wisdom to wait patiently in the out-of-the-way places of the spirit and quietly bring new things to birth in others. Men and women have common sins, but they also have ones very much identified with their particular sex. The traditional sin is pride, and is still very much alive. But according to Margaret Guenther, the sin that clings particularly to women is that of self-contempt. Man's pride and women's self-contempt, while not exclusive to either sex, make relations between the sexes unusually sour at the moment. Perhaps that is why both men and women invoke a high and cruelly idealistic standard of behavior that only super beings could uphold. Modern secular standards of morality are draconian compared to the old-fashioned religious standards which, at least, held out the promise of forgiveness. Most of us make a fundamental error with regard to the nature of morality itself. We all want a workable framework of rules in a fixable world that most of us can follow without any real effort. We like things to work, including our morality, so we try to maneuver ourselves into a morally secure position by changing the rules. The new rules are either a device to punish the politically incorrect or so inconsequential that human relations are trivialized. There is another point of view that this book will do a great deal